Hey people, welcome back to the channel. This is a story in which Naruto is Madara's and Hashirama's grandson and is very OP and smart. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video. Leave a comment if you want to suggest a fanfic for me to read. Check the description for credits and support the creator of the story. So let's begin. Chapter 49 The Choices We Make 3 Senju Compound It was a beautiful day in Konoha, it was warm and sunny all over. The sun was coming up shining upon Konoha as the merchants were opening their stores to start up a fresh new day. A few sunrays broke through the village's barrier and started waking up people inside the houses. This was the unfortunate event for Naruto. The room was dark and a few beams passed through the window and hit him right in the eyes, waking him up from his slumber. He released a small yawn and tried to shift in bed but realized that he couldn't move. He looked down and smiled at his princess who snuggled next to him, resting her head in his shoulder. There was something about having Hinata sleeping on his chest that just felt right. One of the things he enjoyed most was waking up with Hinata next to him. Feeling her warmth against his body, caressing her soft hair. She noticed that Naruto was looking at her with a warm smile. She returned the smile just before she closed her eyes again and placed her head on his chest, releasing a sigh of bliss and happiness. Naruto had proposed last night and Hinata had accepted, and now they would be together forever. It didn't get any better than that. Although the room itself might disagree. For starters, there were clothes everywhere. Naruto's vest and pants were near the door, which meant that they were the first to go. Hinata's jacket and bra were also nearby, although her pants and underwear were actually near the window. Only Kami knows how they got there. I'm so happy that I just want to run and jump everywhere, Naruto whispered and Hinata giggled lightly. I know the feeling, Hinata replied. After everything we have been through, we are finally together forever, Hinata explained, and Naruto gently kissed her forehead. I'm the luckiest guy in the world, Naruto said. Are you crying? Hinata asked, smiling as she saw his moist eyes. Of course not, Naruto quickly replied. It's just dust that got in my eye, Naruto replied, scrubbing his eyes. Hinata knew the truth very well. For someone who never had a family, he just got one of his own. You know, Hinata started as she looked up. We are going to need a new bed, Hinata said as Naruto sighed. Last night had been one of commemoration on their engagement and they got a little carried away. It was your idea to try doing it while we were on Sage mode, Naruto chuckled. Like you didn't love it, Hinata teasingly replied, kissing his cheek. Senjutsu empowers all of our senses, Hinata explained blissfully. And also our strength, and that is why we broke our bed, Naruto said, shaking his head, and watched as Hinata rose up and straddled him. The sheets fell to the bed, revealing Hinata's naked form. It's not like it's going to break again, Hinata lustfully said. Such a tease, Naruto complained, and Hinata giggled. Are you going to do something about it? Hinata asked, giggling like a school girl. Maybe, Naruto half lied and rose up to meet Hinata's lips. Naruto embraced Hinata, pulling her closer as Hinata ran her hands through Naruto's long spiky hair. Their lips met with fierce passion. Naruto turned her around and gently lowered her on the bed, making him stand on top. Hinata hummed in delight as Naruto kissed her neck and gently fondled her breasts. Knock knock. Naruto-kun, if you don't hurry you will miss breakfast, Kushina said as she knocked on the door just before walking away. This sucks, Naruto frowned as he stopped his actions and simply laid on the bed. Maybe not, Hinata replied and got up. She started walking to the bathroom, swaying her hips in a sexy manner. Naruto could only stare at her and follow her movements. Right, we must preserve water, Naruto said in conviction before he got up and quickly followed Hinata into the shower. Water was a precious resource after all. Senju compound. Kitchen. The doors to the kitchen opened and everyone in there shifted their attention to the couple approaching. Both of them had huge smiles of their faces and everyone noted how Hinata seemed to be more clingy than usual. They had such happy expression that it was intoxicating. Looks like someone had a good night, Jiraiya said, wiggling his eyebrows. He was lucky enough that Tsunade wasn't there, otherwise he would already be buried on the ground. Better than good, Hinata said dreamily and raised her hand to show the purple and silver ring on her finger. Naruto-kun proposed last night, Hinata happily said and sat down, but was quickly surrounded by Kushina and Mito wanting the juicy details. About time, Naruto, Hashirama said, chuckling, making Hinata raise an eyebrow in confusion. What do you mean? Hinata asked. You don't know what we suffered with him always haunting us for advice. Where to propose, when to propose, what to say. It was a nightmare, Hashirama explained, and Naruto groaned. Hinata didn't have to know that. Really? Hinata asked, surprised, looking at Naruto. You should have seen him when he came to me to ask how I proposed to Kushina-chan, Minato chuckled, reminiscing of that particular moment. He began wondering what to say and when to do it. He looked like a headless chicken until he began to hyperventilate and proceeded to pass out, falling flat on the ground, Minato said, laughing. Father, Naruto complained, and Minato just chuckled. These are the good memories one should remember, Naruto, Minato advised, rising up. By the way, good work on the Hyuga clan. I'm proud of you, Minato said, making Naruto smile. It went better than I thought. It's a good thing that the clan is still stable even without the caged bird seal, Tobirama said in afterthought. It's good we didn't tell them everything. Can you imagine Hiyashi's face if we told them that the Byakugan comes from the Sharingan? Naruto chuckled and began eating until he realized that everyone was staring at him, including Minato, who was about to leave. Is there something on my face? Naruto asked, confused about the stares. Hold on, Tobirama said. Back up, Hashirama added. What do you mean by the Byakugan coming from the Sharingan? Minato asked, summarizing everyone's questions. Oh yeah, I forgot, me and Hinata-chan never told you guys this, Naruto replied, scratching the back of his head, making everyone else sweat drop. No one else knew where the Byakugan came from because they never had access to both archives. Since I had access to the Uchiha's library and Hinata to the Hyugas, we stumbled upon several files and simply cross-matched them to find the origin of the Byakugan. Naruto began. According to the files, a few hundreds of years ago one lone Uchiha left the clan. It isn't clear if he was a pure blood or a half-blood one, but it doesn't matter at this point. He traveled the world until he fell in love with a woman he met during his travels. Everything seemed normal unless for the fact that this woman had a genetic near-blindness defect, Naruto said. They eventually married and had kids. The Sharingan gene got passed on into the kids and did what he do best. Dojutsus grant the user perfect vision regardless of use or age. Combining this with the genetic blindness gave origin to the Byakugan. A less powerful Dojutsu than the Sharingan but far more powerful in vision, detail and range. Naruto finished his explanation and everyone simply nodded. So that means that the Hyugas were related to the Uchihas in some way, Minato said, and Naruto nodded. That stick up their asses had to come from somewhere, Tobirama said, making everyone chuckle. It's one big coincidence for one Uchiha to fall in love for this particular woman, Jiraiya said in afterthought, and Naruto nodded. All bloodlines begin somewhere. Either from the mixing of several genes or simply by one mutating into something viable. Survival of the fittest, Naruto replied, and everyone resumed their breakfast. By the way, Kushina said, getting the attention. Have you two picked a date? Kushina asked, giddy. She couldn't wait for grandchildren to smooth her with affection. She just knew that a kid from Naruto and Hinata would utterly adorable. Naruto-kun just proposed last night and we didn't talk about it that much. But I do not wish for some big wedding ceremony. I just want our closest friends with Tsunade-sensei preceding the ceremony, Hinata said, and Naruto nodded as well. They didn't wish for some big celebration of their engagement. A simple reunion with their closest friends was far more appealing and the point of it all. Otogakure deep within the sound village everything was quiet. It was such silence that one may consider it creepy and unsettling. The streets were completely empty and not even birds were heard. Isn't it strange for a village being named Sound Village when there was no such thing presently? No, a scream echoed through the empty halls of the main building in the village. Crows burst from the trees from the sudden sound spike. Entering the Otokage Tower and proceeding down into the basements, one seemed to pick up some sniffling sounds. Walking down the halls and approaching the origin of the sound, we come into a pitch-black room. The walls were of brown stone, torches along the walls provided some much necessary light. The whole base seemed to give off some dark and evil aura. The whole ambient seemed taken from some horror movie. As we approached the room, a small trail of blood was seen leaking from the room. It flowed through the floor and into the middle of the hall, and it showed no signs of stopping. The blood started pooling in the middle of the hall, and from the quantity of it, someone was dead. Peering inside, we find two figures on the room. One simply laid on the ground with her eyes a hollow white and her skin a ghostly white, like it had been drained of all of their blood. Above this figure stood another one kneeling next to the downed one. This figure had a white long-sleeved shirt which was open at the torso. He wore dark blue pants with a blue cloth hanging from halfway up his stomach to his knees. He also wore black arm guards that covered his forearms and stretched up to reach his upper biceps. He also wore a purple rope belt around his waist, tied in a bow. He was Uchiha Sasuke, a genetic clone that Orochimaru had engineered from the original one. Sasuke was kneeling next to this person as he weakly gripped a sword that was pushed right through the figure's chest, directly through her heart. Blood continued leaking from the wound as it flowed to the hall. "Why Koto-chan?" Sasuke cried as he looked to the dead eyes of his friend. He couldn't understand why she would attack him out of nowhere. She had long black hair, which is in a Heim-style cut, and black, pupilless eyes. Attire-wise, she wore a pale green form-fitting vest, with an opening in the center which shows off her cleavage and her stomach, and a camouflage-patterned scarf and skirt. "I loved you," Sasuke said, looking away from her when realization hit him. He had just killed the only person he cared for in this village, the only person he loved. He couldn't fathom as to why she attacked him. They were good friends ever since they met a few weeks ago, and Sasuke knew he liked her more than simple friend. "Why?" Sasuke wailed in grief as his Sharingan unwillingly flared to life. It was almost a cruel punishment that his Sharingan should flare. Punishment as the Sharingan would forever remember the scene that laid just before him. The scene with Sasuke driving a sword through his lover's heart and blood pouring everywhere. Sasuke swiped his cheek with his hands to try clear the tears. Sasuke's chakra spiked and his Sharingan flared to life. It had 3 tomos. A chunk of chakra was funneled towards his eyes and Sasuke's Sharingan started spinning and glowing. In the pitch-black room, his Sharingan was the thing that definitely stood out. Blood-red eyes with pitch marks marking spinning and glowing. His eyes began to slow down and the 3 tomos were completely gone. A whole new pattern was revealed to the world. His eyes were black in the background with 3 blood-red intersecting ellipses. Sasuke's eyes had changed into the all-powerful Mangekyo Sharingan. "What's this?" Sasuke wondered out loud, looking down. Yet again he could see his own reflection in the blood pooling on the ground. It seemed yet another cruel joke that he had to endure. "That is the Mangekyo Sharingan. The next stage of the Sharingan, young Sasuke," Orochimaru said as he stepped into the room and looked at the gruesome display. He couldn't but smirk that his plan worked so flawlessly. He knew that the girl had a crush on young Sasuke and he simply had to play things right for it to work. "Why?" Sasuke asked and Orochimaru got confused. "Why did she attack me?" Sasuke sadly asked and Orochimaru frowned. It was good that he attained the Mangekyo, but he never expected Sasuke to bond with the girl to the extent of actually loving her. "She must have had her reasons," Orochimaru simply replied, walking towards Sasuke and kneeling beside him. "Come with me, Sasuke-kun," Orochimaru said, rising back up and walking towards the door when he noticed that Sasuke hadn't moved yet. Sasuke was still staring at the girl's corpse. "What will happen to her?" Sasuke asked. "She will have a proper burial later on," Orochimaru replied and watched as Sasuke rose and began walking towards him. "I will help you forget the pain you are feeling," Orochimaru said and Sasuke only nodded. "Kabuto," Orochimaru said and Kabuto stepped out from the shadows. "Clean the room." "I will proceed with the ritual," Orochimaru informed him and Kabuto nodded. Orochimaru and Sasuke walked into another pitch-black room with strong wooden doors. The door cringed as it opened to reveal a seemingly empty room. "Come, Sasuke-kun," Orochimaru opening the door and motioning Sasuke to enter, which he did without hesitation. "Do you wish to forget the pain?" Orochimaru asked with his eyes glinting. The goal he fought so hard to achieve was but a few minutes from his grasp. "Yes," Sasuke simply replied and Orochimaru nodded. "Then do not fear or fight what is to come," Orochimaru said and opened his mouth to unhuman proportions. From Orochimaru's body came a gigantic white snake composed of smaller white snakes. This was Orochimaru's true form. Orochimaru-sama. Sasuke asked, slightly shaken from seeing this big snake slither out of Orochimaru's supposed body. Do not fear me, child, Orochimaru said as he coiled himself around Sasuke's body, locking eyes with the young Uchiha. Furo Fushi no Jutsu, eternal youth and immortality technique. Orochimaru said, and the world started changing. Sasuke and Orochimaru were no longer in the dark room, but they were in what seemed to be a vast place. The sky was dark purple, and looking down, the ground was nothing but a wall of pink muscles that seemed to spasm at random intervals. What's this? Sasuke asked fearfully. With this I will accomplish my goal, Orochimaru said, chuckling darkly as the muscles began to crawl up Sasuke's body. Sasuke tried struggling, but he was overcome in just seconds. The muscles covered him completely and Orochimaru smirked. After so many struggles and years of waiting, he had finally reached his goal, he had finally attained the Sharingan. Who are you now? Kabuto asked as he came into the room and noticed that Sasuke was standing frozen. On the ground was a gigantic white snake, and by the looks of it, it was obviously dead. Sasuke's Sharingan flared into existence and began spinning until it became the Mangekyo. Kuku, who do you think? With Uchiha now. Uchiha now had just returned from her appointed mission in Konoha. Her objective was to destroy the academy and kill every single student and teacher inside. All of that was to prove to Naruto that Tobi, or as she knew him, Uchiha Fugaku, that he was no prey. Now looked down at the crater that hid the Uchiha clan's hideout. She jumped down, arriving near the skeleton what once was a very large animal, if the bones were anything to go by. Where is he? Now asked towards the plant-like creature that rose from the ground as she entered the hideout. In the main hall, the white Zetsu replied. Although he isn't pleased with you, the black Zetsu added. Now replied as she ignored Zetsu and continued walking forward. I'll deal with him, now said, and went towards Toba's room. Now passed through several Uchihas a long way and simply gave them a brief nod of acknowledgement. She arrived at Toba's room and knocked on the door. Now was about to reach for the handle when Tobi phased right through the door and her, making her jump back in surprise. Without even giving her a warning, Tobi placed a hand on her shoulder and warped her away with him as well. They both arrived at another destination. Tobi was the first to arrive and simply dropped now to the ground. What's the meaning of this? Now asked, gritting her teeth to her leader. Now looked around to pinpoint her location and noticed that she was near the border of the Land of Fire, more specifically she was standing on the Valley of the End. Tobi jumped away and landed on the statue of Uchiha Madara. Now rose from the ground and noticed that she was standing on the statue of Senju Hashirama. She looked towards Tobi and noticed that he began to remove his mask and simply dropped it to the ground to reveal the face of Uchiha Fugaku. The Senju DNA in him did a good job as he looked like he aged nothing in 17 years. I'm disappointed with you now, Chan, Fugaku replied as he sat down as watched as now slightly tense before relaxing once again. You were never one to fail missions to begin with, but I never expected for you to fail them on purpose, Fugaku said, sighing and looking up. Care to explain why you decided to forget the mission? Fugaku asked as he locked eyes with her. I may be under your command, but I am not your tool to do as you please, now snarled at Fugaku. You asked me to kill some innocent kids, which I would never do. I have my standards, now explained. I see, Fugaku said, getting up. I should have expected this from you. Your lineage was one of softness after all. Your sister did the same thing when I asked something similar, Fugaku explained, chuckling, and watched as now got confused. You didn't know, did you? Fugaku mockingly asked. Your sister was just like you. You, your sister, Makoto, and even that cousin of yours Obito. You were all too soft and kind-hearted for the Uchiha clan. I thought that making an example of your sister would solve that in you, but I was mistaken, Fugaku simply explained and watched as now tensed. What do you mean by making an example of my older sister? Now asked, narrowing her eyes at Fugaku. Exactly like that. She was a soft-hearted like many before her, and she was influencing you, the strongest of the clan next to me. You looked up at her like anyone would do to their own older sister, and I couldn't have that, so I took steps. A simple poison in her food to make it look like she died of her eyes not accepting her body, Fugaku explained, smiling darkly. What? Now asked in shock. You killed my sister just because she was kind, now mumbled to herself. Why? Now asked, although Fugaku had just given her the answer. I want soldiers. I don't need anything else but soldiers, Fugaku simply replied. Your sister became a liability the moment she started refusing the missions I gave her because she couldn't do them, but I had hope for you now, Chan. You, who were so fond of my son Itachi. I hoped that you would outgrow that kindness that seemed to be instilled in your family and became what you were supposed to be, an Uchiha clan shinobi, Fugaku said and watched as lone terror ran down her face. You killed my sister, now simply said looking at the ground. You killed the only thing I had left of my family, now sadly said and suddenly looked up with her mangekyu blazing. I was a fool to be following you in the first place. I should have stayed by Konoha's side. The Uchiha clan was the strongest in Konoha. We were respected both for our power and loyalty, that is until you came around, now began. You are nothing but a greedy man that led our great clan into nothingness and eventually you will kill us all. Itachi-kun was right when he chose to stay by Konoha's side, now said as her chakra flared and she took her sword from her waist. You are nothing more than darkness and I will be the light that shall defeat you, now yelled as she pointed her sword towards Fugaku who simply chuckled. Enter Naruto Shippuden, my name, foolish girl, Fugaku said and watched as now jumped from the statue, coming towards him. Now arrived near Fugaku and made a downward slice, only to phase right through him and hit the ground. Now quickly repositioned herself, dodging a punch from Fugaku and slashed across Fugaku's chest. Fugaku chuckled as he watched the blade phase through him. Once the blade left his chest, he simply caught the handle and outmaneuvering now, he placed her on a chokehold. Such naive girl, Fugaku whispered into her ear as she struggled to get free. There is no darkness without light, Fugaku replied as he let go of Now who stumbled forward to regain her breath. Now looked back and quickly brought her arms to block a powerful kick from Fugaku. Now was sent flying and collided with Hashirama's statue. A few rocks were set free from the impact and splashed into the water. Now coughed but quickly regained her breathing. She looked up to see Fugaku in the same place. Kaiten, Goryuka no Jutsu, Great Dragon Fire Technique. Now said as she sent a torrent of fire shaped in the form of a dragon towards her enemy. Kamui, Fugaku said chuckling as he absorbed the whole fire jutsu into his personal dimension. Kaiten, Bakufu Ranbu Bomb Blast Dance. Fugaku said as he needed chakra inside his body and converted into fire. Using the fire jutsu he absorbed from Now, he expelled a continuous stream of flames, which spiraled outwards, creating a massive fire vortex. Now's eyes widened at the magnitude of the jutsu. Fugaku had used his own jutsu and further increased its power by using her jutsu. Now's eyes glowed and purple ribcage formed around her. The fire jutsu clashed with her Susanoo shield but didn't even scorch it. Susanoo wasn't her ultimate defense for nothing. Yasaka no Magatama, Yasaka beads. Now said as her Susanoo glowed and slightly increased in size. A couple arms sprouted from the ribcage and, as they spread apart, pieces of chakra floated in the air between them. Several dark purple beads were shot towards Fugaku at high speeds. When will she learn? Fugaku thought to himself in amusement as the gigantic beads collided with the statue ripping out chunks of stone. Fugaku had simply used his Kamui to escape the attacks and jumped down into the water. Fugaku looked straight forward and narrowed his eyes when he noticed Now, who had her hands on the water. Sweet and water style. Now said as the lake started shaking and making Fugaku's eyes widen in disbelief. Sen Sudareki, 1,000 strikes. Now shouted as the lake all around her started giving off steam. Right before Fugaku's eyes hundreds upon hundreds of water tentacles started forming out of the water. Now, who still held her hands on the lake, smirked as the tentacles blurred towards Fugaku who began evasive maneuvers. Fugaku's was running for dear life. There were so many tentacles that they were even blocking his view of the statues. They were so many that they almost blot out the sun, leaving Fugaku to fight in the shadows. Fugaku ducked under a tentacle and used his Kamui to avoid another one. Kaiten, Ruka no Jutsu, Fire Dragon Technique. Fugaku said and unleashed a torrent of fire against the water tentacles. He watched with great satisfaction as most of the water whips were vaporized. He quickly lost his smile when he noticed the whips simply reformed themselves from the water. I can't use my Kamui indefinitely and there are too many whips for me to track, Fugaku thought as he tried to think of a way to end this jutsu. Otherwise he would be forced to evaporate the whole lake, which would be impossible. He was shot from his thoughts when a water whip got past his defenses and hit him on the shoulder, making him stumble. Enough, Fugaku said, blurring through hand seals. Kaiten. Genkyu Great Blaze Ball. Fugaku exhaled a gigantic sphere of scorching flames that vaporized and destroyed everything in its path. Everything around Fugaku was decimated and only steam remained. Fugaku looked in annoyance as every single water tentacle slowly reformed, but he caught a glimpse of Nao, who was still in the same position as she was when she began the jutsu. Fugaku quickly realized this jutsu's weakness. In order for it to work properly, the jutsu caster would need a large body of water nearby, but more importantly, this jutsu requires the caster to be stationary and feed chakra continuously so that any destroyed tentacle may be reformed. Fugaku smirked and quickly dashed towards Nao at high speeds. Several water tentacles tried to block his path but simply phased right through them until he was upon Nao. Fugaku arrived near Nao and immediately went for a straight punch, only for Nao to tilt her head to the side and jump away to safety. Fugaku watched as the water tentacles dispelled back into the river. That was one particularly annoying jutsu. To think you had water affinity as well, just like Itachi. It looks like you were made for each other, Fugaku said in a mocking voice. While he was mocking his opponent, even he had to admire the potency and beauty of the jutsu. You think too high of Itachi-kun. I kicked his ass several times during our shinobi career, Nao said, smirking as she had finally understood the timing on Fugaku's kamui. She knew very well that his Mangekyu jutsu was simply stronger than her own, but like everything else, his kamui had a weakness. And she found it when Fugaku chose to fight the water tentacles instead of simply standing by. Kaiten. Hosenka no Jutsu, Phoenix Fire Technique. Nao said as she released several fire balls towards Fugaku, who simply shook his head in defeat. Fugaku used his kamui and simply absorbed the jutsu into his dimension. Fugaku realized that the jutsu was taking longer to absorb than usual. She hid shuriken among the fire balls to delay my absorption. Clever girl, Fugaku thought to himself as he noticed Nao reappear next to him in a blur of speed. Fugaku simply stopped absorbing the jutsu and allowed a few fireballs to hit him. Simple fireballs did nothing against him. Nao swinged her sword horizontally and watched in shock as Tobi easily caught her blade between two fingers. Fugaku used her shock and punched her on the gut, making her gasp. I expected more from you, Fugaku said as he picked Nao up from her neck and simply watched her struggle for air. Nao's eyes started glowing as she made her best efforts to look into Fugaku. Petrifying gaze, Nao said, catching Fugaku in her Manchuku's strongest genjutsu. Fugaku was momentarily caught in the genjutsu, which allowed Nao to get free from his grasp. Nao jumped back as she nursed her neck and began taking deep breaths. Using the Mangekyu always took huge chunks of her chakra. Not bad, Fugaku said, chuckling as he easily broke the genjutsu. When will you realize that you can't win? Fugaku asked, looking straight at her. You should know better than to underestimate me, Nao snarled at her former leader. Nao took a single kunai and hurled it at the top of her speed towards Fugaku, who simply shook his head. He had expected more from her. Fugaku stoically waited for the kunai to reach and simply allowed it to phase right through his left eye. I win, Nao said, laughing weakly, and Fugaku raised an eyebrow in confusion. Fugaku suddenly yelled to the heavens and dropped to his knees. He quickly brought his hand to his face to try and stem the blood that was leaking from his left eye. Fugaku stared at the lake and into his own reflection only to see a deep gash on his left eye. He couldn't even identify that it was an eye to begin with. Amaterasu, Nao said, taking advantage of Fugaku's shock as she enveloped him in a cloak of pitch-black flames. She watched with great competence as Fugaku rolled on the water in pain until he began to sink. I told you not to underestimate me, Nao said, smiling and taking deep breaths. She had won the battle with a simple henge and a shadow clone. Squelch now gasped as her chest was suddenly pierced a kunai from behind. She looked down to see the tip of the kunai protruding right from her chest, just above her heart. She coughed a large amount of blood and shakily looked backwards. Fugaku was standing there with a pissed-off expression. His clothes and chunks of his skin were completely burned, but above all, his left eye was completely destroyed. Nao pushed forward, crying in pain as the blade left her chest. She stumbled forward and fell to her knees as blood started pooling on the water. I never expected for you to make a shadow clone and transform it into a shuriken that you used as a Trojan horse to get into my personal dimension, Fugaku said, gritting his teeth. I should have not underestimated you. You were my second in command after me after all, Fugaku explained and watched as Nao took deep and ragged breaths. It was foolish of you to challenge me, Nao-chan, Fugaku said. He would make her pay. She had wounded him, but above all else, she had destroyed one of the things he held more precious. She had blinded him on his left eye. Fugaku raised an eyebrow when he felt a genjutsu wash over the area. He looked in confusion towards Nao and watched as she disappeared into thin air as if she never existed in the first place. Fugaku smirked and looked to his right just in time to see Nao materialized herself. The wound on her chest was completely gone but was replaced with a hollow white right eye. So you sacrificed your right eye to survive yet again, Fugaku said, chuckling. You lost your ability to use your genjutsu and your Susanoo. You are pathetically weak now, but if you want a battle, I shall give you one, Fugaku said as his chakra spiked and the ground started shaking. The huge lake they were standing on started vibrating as waves were created. Mokuten, wood style. Fugaku yelled as he clasped his hands together in the snake seal. Jukai Koten, deep forest creation. Fugaku added as thousands upon thousands of trees suddenly burst from the water. Nao's eyes widened at the sheer magnitude of the jutsu. The trees rose from the water and high into the sky, they pierced the mountains, dislocating huge chunks of it. They wrapped themselves around the two statues, tearing them apart. Nao watched as the trees quickly approached her position and she knew she had to do something quickly. Nao held her sword horizontally in front of her chest. She placed her left hand on the hilt. Kaden. Hinoken Kaden, flaming sword. Nao said. She ran her hand over the blade and watched as her sword suddenly ignited into whitish flames. She avoided looking directly at the blade due to the light being emitted. Nao disappeared in a burst of speed. Kaden. Kasai Sarasu, fire slash. Nao said as she flicked her blade forward. An arc of fire was released from her blade, cutting right through the incoming trees. Nao smirked as she landed on the tree and started running upwards it, heading right towards to Fugaku. Nao ducked and sliced her way towards the forest that had just grown. While the trees might be numerous and strong, they were no match against her heated blade that sliced them down like a hot knife through butter. Mokuten. Sashiki no Jutsu, cutting sprigs. Fugaku said as several sharp wooden spikes grew from the trees. Fugaku picked up a couple and, with strength and precision, he hurled them all towards the incoming enemy. Nao flexed her fiery blade once again. Kaden. Shio Senkai, whirling death. Nao said as she pointed her blade forward, towards the incoming projectiles. The blade's flames quickly grew in size. Nao flexed her blade and released a vortex of fire that vaporized the wooden spikes. Nao arrived near Fugaku and did a lightning-fast horizontal swipe just above his head. Fugaku ducked under her swing and watched as the blade left a trail of fire behind it. Fugaku jumped backwards and extended his right arm forward. Mokuten. Daijiren no Jutsu, Great Forest. Fugaku said as his right arm suddenly transformed into wood. From his arms came out dozens of wooden tentacles that quickly wrapped themselves around Nao. Nao struggled to get free until she poofed in smoke to reveal single wooden log in her place. There was no shortage of wooden logs around, not since Fugaku was willingly creating them. You are a coward, Fugaku. Fight me like an Uchiha instead of using power that belonged to Senju. Where is your pride? Nao snarled at Fugaku as she blurred through hand seals. Kaden. Hi-o Arakuru, raging fire. Nao said as she unleashed torrents upon torrents of fire that spread through the whole forest. All around her the fire was consuming the trees that Fugaku had created. The water in the lake did nothing to ease the raging inferno that Nao had set. Chunks of wood snapped from the trees and hit the lake with large splash sounds. Fugaku jumped away from the falling trees and landed on the nearby branches. He swiped his arm on his forehead to wipe the sweat away from the massive heat that Nao's inferno was creating. All around him steam was being released as the water evaporated. Fugaku looked around for Nao when he heard a whistling sound. He turned around just in time to avoid multiple blazing shurikens that came from his blind spot. As Fugaku was jumping backwards, Nao materialized right next to him. Fugaku allowed Nao's punch to phase right through him and hit the tree where he was standing. Fugaku moved to block another punch but quickly changing his mind and jumped back when he noticed that Nao's hands had an orange glow in them. Fugaku looked back towards the tree Nao hit and noticed the black spot from her punch. This is my Kasai no Ken, fire fist. Nao said as her other arm and legs started getting an orange glow as several flames appeared around them. It looked like Nao had her arms and legs on fire although she didn't seem to be in pain. I will show you why I was considered the best in the clan in fire ninjutsu, Nao said as she dashed towards Fugaku who braced himself. Such a waste of potential, Fugaku thought to himself frowning. The girl held such power and potential even without the Sharingan and yet he had to kill her for her incompetence and disrespect. He wasn't feeling any guilt or regret, just pity. Hidema, fire ball. Nao said punching straight forward and unleashing a ball of fire directly towards Fugaku who tilted his head to the side to avoid the flames. Nao jumped in the air and spinned around. Kasai no Nami, fire wave. Nao said as she released a wave of fire towards Fugaku who simply allowed it to phase right through him. Nao dashed forward and engaged Fugaku in clash of fists and kicks. Fugaku used his Kamui as much as he could to outmaneuver Nao. Every single strike that Fugaku blocked or parried, he would regret it as he would get a piece of scorched skin as payment. Nao slammed her foot on the ground and flexed her arms forward. Without even a single hand seal, fire sprouted from her palms heading straight towards Fugaku. Mokuten. Mokujo Heiki, wooden wall. Fugaku said slamming both hands on the ground. Several wooden pillars branched out from the trees and surrounded Fugaku, forming a dome around him. The fire wave clashed with the wooden walls. Fugaku activated his Kamui and sank into the ground. Nao stopped her attack once she noticed that behind the wooden dome was no one. She looked around and focused on her senses. Fugaku immediately appeared behind her and proceeded to kick in the back. Nao flew back and collided with one of trees that quickly wrapped itself around her, restraining her movements. Kaiten. Kasai no Tate, fire shield. Nao said as all of her skin started glowing orange. Nao started sweating as her whole erupted in flames, scorching the wood all around her and turning it nothing more than ashes. Nao freed herself from the trees and fell to the ground taking deep breaths. Her chakra stores were nearing empty and she wouldn't last much longer. Unbelievable, Fugaku said looking at Nao with shock. To think you would be this talented. How did you even lose against the Hyuga girl back in Kiri? Fugaku asked curious. The amount of control she held of the fire was astonishing. That battle opened my eyes. I relied on my Sharingan too much back then and my defeat only proved that. I thought myself to be undefeatable and I got a rude wake-up call but I get the feeling that even with this I wouldn't be able to defeat her should we ever meet again, Nao said smirking as she looked towards her flaming arms. My last jutsu, Nao thought to herself sadly, she was running on fumes. Amaterasu, Nao said looking towards his arms as they erupted in black flames. Her Sharingan deactivated from lack of chakra. Fugaku's eyes widened in disbelief when he saw Nao ignite her own arms in the black flames of Amaterasu. She's using the fire on her arms as the target for the Amaterasu flames. As long as she holds her jutsu the black flames won't burn her, Fugaku thought to himself. Nao was really putting everything she could into the fight. Come, Nao said as she waited for Fugaku to make his move. She knew that Fugaku would try and avoid engaging in taijutsu as off no. Fugaku might many things but fool wasn't in his description. If you won't then I will, Nao said as she rushed Fugaku head on intending to go out with a bang. Nao tried a punch to Fugaku's jaw only for it to phase through him. Fugaku watched as her Amaterasu empowered arm phased right through him. Once Nao's arm had left him, Fugaku brought his knee to her stomach. Nao buckled forward and gasped in pain. Nao bit back the pain and engaged Fugaku once again in taijutsu. Blow after blow was getting past Nao's defenses and hitting her. Fugaku tilted his body back and slammed his foot as hard as he could into Nao's chest and watched as she tumbled through the trees. Fugaku smirked as the battle was over. He calmly walked towards Nao as she knelt and took deep breaths. Her hair covered most of her face, sweat was pouring freely from her forehead and her clothes were completely burned from her fire jutsus. Fugaku looked towards her arms and watched as the Amaterasu flames faded away. Nao watched as Fugaku bent down and picked up her sword. There was nothing she could do about it. She had ran out of chakra, she was tired. All she wanted right now was to die and simply be reunited with her sister and family in the other side. Now didn't even wince as Fugaku slowly drove her sword through her chest and heart. Fugaku rose up and brought now with him as she stood pierced in the sword like some piece of meat in a wooden stick. Fugaku was completely affronted with her. Even in defeat and death, now was smiling. I hope you keep that smile of yours when you met the rest of your family, Fugaku said and simply flexed the blade letting Nao's body fall to the water. Fugaku didn't waste more time and simply swirled away, he had a Sharingan to replace. Nao was slowly drifting away in the water. She was floating and looking at the beautiful blue sky. She was barely alive at this point but she couldn't help but get a strange feeling that suddenly overcame her. She wanted nothing more than to be reunited with her family but somehow, she felt that it wasn't her time go yet. Izanagi, now thought to herself using the remains of her chakra and the last of her eye. The wound on her chest healed and her eyes closed from chakra exhaustion. She slowly drifted away, carried away by the current. She didn't know if she would even survive but she felt she had to try. Note: before we start the new chapter, the author mislabeled chapter 50 as chapter 51 and chapter 51 as chapter 52, and so on. So PLS keep it in mind while watching the video as I will not be making these changes. Now let us begin. Chapter 50 First 2 new lights previously Izanagi, now thought to herself using the remains of her chakra and the last of her eyes. The wound on her chest healed and her eyes closed from chakra exhaustion. She slowly drifted away, carried away by the current. She didn't know if she would even survive but she felt she had to try. Moments earlier Itachi was hoping from tree branch. He was returning from Konoha due to his talk with Naruto a couple days ago. Itachi was invisible, concealed by the shadows of the night. With his body healed and back to perfect condition he could use his full speed. Itachi placed a foot on a tree branch and launched himself forward at the top of his speed. He narrowed his eyes to block the air from drying up his eyes. He looked right only to spot a massive column of black smoke rising on the horizon. Since he had time Itachi decided to investigate. It was night, and a fire in the middle of the night would definitely stick out, especially one of this magnitude. Valley of the End what the hell happened here? Itachi mumbled to himself in disbelief. The valley was completely ruined. The two statues of both Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara were now nothing more than broken rock on the ground. But what caught Itachi's attention was the massive forest that stood blazing in the middle of the valley. Gigantic trees, big as the statues themselves, were burning with white-hot flames. Chunks of trees snapped, hitting the water with large splash sounds. Itachi's activated his Sharingan only to see chakra residue in the air. There was a battle here and it wasn't long ago. Itachi jumped down from the valley and into the water, keeping his distance from the fire raging on. Smack! Itachi kicked something accidentally and looked down. An orange mask with a swirl pattern revolving around the right eye socket. Toba's mask, Itachi stated to himself as he bent down and picked the mask, surveying his surroundings for the possibility of finding the masked man's identity. Itachi kept walking forward, analyzing the state of the valley. It had to have been a great battle for the valley to be left in such state. He looked down at the river and noticed a small trail of blood flowing downwards with the river. Anyone else would miss it as it was so small, but not the Sharingan. Itachi hopped into the water and began walking down the river, following the current and the blood's trail. Itachi walked a few miles until he arrived near a small clearing where the river's flow had decreased significantly. Itachi looked around until his eyes landed on a body lying down by the shore. Itachi walked towards the body. Just from the distance he could tell that this person would most likely be dead. The clothes were completely torn, he could see burn marks on her arms and legs, and bleeding cuts all over the remaining of the body. As Itachi was closing in he took time to note her clothes. The body had an attire consisting of a dark blue top with black gloves, black boots, black shorts, but what really caught his eyes was the Uchiha clan symbol on her back. Check profile for image, and Uchiha. Itachi asked to himself in disbelief as he suddenly rushed the body. He arrived near the body and bent down, placing 2 fingers on her neck. She's alive, Itachi thought as he detected a very faint pulse. He gently turned her around and his eyes widened at the person lying down right in front of him. Now, Itachi breathed out. Naruto had told him that the Uchiha clan was Still alive, but it was one hell of a coincidence for him to simply stumble upon one Uchiha just days after his talk with Naruto. Itachi moved her body further into the land and laid her on the ground, facing up. Itachi placed his fingers on the middle of her chest, right above her heart, and released a small electric discharge. It was a technique taught to every single shinobi in the Corps and one of the basic medical ninjutsu. A small static shock directly into the heart to jump-start a body if need be. Nao's body gave a small jerk as she started stirring. Itachi watched as Nao slowly opened his eyes, only for a hollow white to appear instead of the black color he remembered. Did she sacrifice her eyes? Itachi mused in thought as he heard some gurgling sound coming from Nao. Who? Nao said as she started coughing. Are you? Nao managed to get out only to hear a small chuckle. What mess did you get yourself into this time? Nao-chan, Itachi replied, smiling down at his former comrade. There was quite a story behind these two. Nao's eyes widened when she recognized the voice. She slowly turned towards the voice but saw nothing but darkness. Itachi-kun, Nao said, slowly chuckling until she began coughing again. Itachi moved Nao so that she laid perfectly flat on the ground. Don't worry, I will take care of you, Itachi said, smiling, not that Nao could see it. Itachi went towards his pocket and removed a single three-pronged kunai. Without a moment hesitation, he stabbed it on the ground, disappearing in a yellow flash with Nao in tow. Moments earlier, Senju compound I finally did it, Naruto yelled in joy of success. Naruto quickly sealed everything and swirled towards the Senju compound. Hinata, Hashirama, Tobirama, Mito, Minato, Kushina and Gaara. All of you in the kitchen in 5 minutes, Naruto yelled as he also ran towards the kitchen to set up everything. One by one everyone walked towards the kitchen, although it weren't just the ones Naruto called, as everyone was curious what the ruckus was all about. Dragons, Naruto said, getting the attention of his group. Front and center, Naruto said, and watched as the members of the group stepped forward. I have a gift for all of you, Naruto said, grinning as he took out 8 scrolls and tossed one to each member of the group, keeping one for himself. What's this? Minato asked, curious about this gift. Unseal it and you shall see, Naruto replied, and Minato shrugged. Minato kneeled on the ground and unwrapped his scroll. Kai, release, Minato said as he slammed his hand on the scroll. Once the cloud of smoke had dissipated, on the ground laid a single egg. Although this wasn't some ordinary chicken egg. This egg's shell was completely white and it was slightly bigger than a football. At least the omelet will be enough for all of us, Jiraiya joked, and everyone laughed until he saw the look of horror in Naruto. You gave us a big egg, Minato said, disgruntled. He was hoping for something a bit more, well, more for such a big fuss. While it is an egg, it's so much more than that, Naruto cryptically said, and watched as Minato glared at him. Just channel chakra into the egg and think of yellow. It will take a considerable amount, so don't worry, Naruto explained, and Minato did just that. Minato placed his right hand on top of the egg and concentrated. Minato's hand started glowing blue and everyone watched with anticipation what would come from all of this. 5 minutes later and Minato was already starting to sweat from all the chakra the damn thing was eating. Suddenly the egg stopped absorbing chakra and Minato retracted his hand, wiping the sweat from his forehead. Now what? Minato asked towards Naruto. He did as Naruto said, but nothing was happening. Give it a few moments, Naruto said, and Minato nodded, sitting down. How could such small thing almost empty him of his reserves? He had a lot of chakra, not much as Naruto but enough to put some cages to shame. As Minato raised his head from being tired of waiting, the egg started shaking, breaking everyone from their boredom. Everyone watched as the egg started shaking even more and clawing sounds could be heard coming from inside the egg. A strange yellow pattern started forming around the egg's shell, making everyone focus all their attention of said egg. Here he comes, Naruto said, and everyone's breathing hitched as a piece of the egg's shell flew away and what seemed to be an yellow claw stepped out. The egg shook once more and suddenly exploded, sending pieces of his shell flying everywhere. Everyone covered their face so they didn't get hit with the shrapnel. Once they uncovered their faces, everyone's jaw dropped at the creature standing in the middle of the kitchen. He resembled some form of reptile, like lizards and, in some relation, snakes themselves. This creature's body was completely covered in yellowish shiny scales, with 4 legs and long tail. The creature had a long snout and an impressive jaw line filled the razor-sharp teeth. He had eyes yellow as well with a black vertical slit like those of snake, but what really stood out was a pair of wings that protruded from his back. Is that what I think it is? Jiraiya yelled, pointing towards the creature in the middle of the room, who seemed to react to his outburst and gave him a toothy grin showing his razor-sharp teeth and an impressive pair of fangs. A dragon, alive and in the flesh, Naruto said, pointing towards the dragon, who seemed to get what was happening and simply rose to stand on two legs and spread his wings. And is your partner from now and until the day you die, Naruto said, pointing towards Minato, who had a shocked face. BBU, but Minato tried to argue, but Naruto quickly shut him down. No buts. He is keyed to your chakra and will only answer to you. He isn't your slave or pet. He's your partner from now on, so treat him with respect, Naruto said, and the dragon jumped into the air and landed on Minato's shoulders. He coiled around his neck until he began to lick Minato's cheek. I guess he's alright, Minato said, scratching the head of the dragon and making Naruto nod. His name is Yellow. A fitting name for the mighty Kiroi Senko, Yellow Flash, wouldn't you say? Naruto snickered and watched as the dragon growled slowly before laying his head down to probably sleep. I thought that dragons didn't exist, Tamari stated, looking at Yellow. They do now. They will take time to grow, Naruto explained. How big will they get? Tsunade asked, pausing when she remembered the legends. Big as the Biju, Naruto simply replied as he crouched and unsealed his own egg. Everyone paled at the thought of having 8 dragons, the size of mountains, just simply strolling around Konoha. They were broken from their thoughts when they heard another an egg crack and they turned around to see Hinata scratching the chin of a purple dragon. Growl. Tsunade turned her head again, this time towards Naruto, who was also petting a big silver dragon. Tsunade and the rest of the Senju compound, with the exception of the 8 dragons of the leaf, paled when they had cracks all over the place. Not even 5 minutes later there were 8 dragons on the kitchen running all over the place, like some kids on a sugar rush. Oh man, I want one too, Kankuro said as he kneeled in front of Naruto. No can do. Limited edition only, Naruto chuckled. Please see, Kankuro whined. Please see, Silver mocked from the ceiling. Everyone looked up to see Silver with his claws dug onto the ceiling. Oh, mine can already talk, Naruto said with sparkles on his eyes. And it looks like he got your traits, personality-wise, Hinata said as she watched the Silver mock poor Kankuro. Things you should know about your partners. They have chakra just like you and they bear the same affinities you have, so they can work properly with you in combat, Naruto explained, and everyone nodded. Another thing. Should any of them die you will live on, but if you die, so will your dragons, Naruto said in a serious voice. The dragon were their partners and were bounded to them by life. Where the hell are they going to live? Tsunade yelled, making everyone stare at her. The Senjuness is strong in that one, Mito thought to herself, sighing. Do you think we can set them up in the summon world? Tobirama asked, making everyone ponder. Hey Fox, Naruto thought to himself. Yeah, Kurama replied as he yawned and stretched, popping a few joints. Is the summon realm all occupied? Naruto asked, making Kurama raise an eyebrow at his question. Why do you ask? Kurama asked, surprised by the question. Naruto simply looked to the ceiling. What the hell are dragons doing here? Kurama yelled. I created them. I read a book about reptiles and another one from Legends, Naruto replied, grinning and making Kurama shake his head his disbelief. There are a few lands unoccupied that they can use without much trouble, Kurama answered, and Naruto proceeded to forward the information to Tobirama, who was already devising a small seal in the form of a tattoo to summon their partners into battle should they need them. We got company, Naruto said as he backflipped into the middle of the room and slammed his hand on the ground. In a flash of yellow Itachi and now were standing in the middle of the room. I thought you were supposed to come to me, Itachi said as he found himself on the Senju compound. I may trust you, Itachi, but not far enough to jump towards you and into a possible ambush, Naruto replied. What the? Itachi said out loud when he came face to face with 8 dragons who were standing just inches away from his face, staring at him. His Sharingan flared to life, and that was until he noticed the rest of the room. Senju Hashirama, Senju Tobirama, Namikaze Minato, Uzumaki Mito and Senju Kushina. BBU boo, Itachi tried to come out with the right words, but his brain seemed unable to process the events. At least he didn't faint like Tsunade and Hiruzen had to back in the day. What can I do for you, Itachi? Naruto asked, breaking Itachi's line of thought. Itachi looked away from the Senju brothers and back into Nao, who was breathing harshly. She won't last much longer. I can feel her life force slipping away, Naruto said as he took a good look at the Uchiha in Itachi's arms. I need your help once again. I need you to heal her, Itachi stoically said. Bah, a dead Uchiha is a good one, Tobirama simply replied, making Itachi frown. What did I tell you about having prejudice about the Uchihas, Hashirama grumbled. Besides, it's Naruto's choice if he wants to heal her or not, Hashirama explained, and Tobirama scoffed but nodded nonetheless. Why should I heal her? Naruto asked towards Itachi, who remained silent and with his head down. She has been working for Tobi all along. She blew up a hospital in Kiri and almost killed Hinata-chan, Naruto explained. She is in this state for fighting Tobi. You should see the state of the Valley of the End, everything was destroyed, even Madara's and his statue, Itachi said, motioning to Hashirama. They destroyed my gorgeous statue, Hashirama said as he hung his head. What do you think, Kurama? Naruto asked towards his partner. It's your choice, Naruto, Kurama replied, seriously wondering what Naruto would do. Even so, one good deed doesn't at all for a lifetime of wrongs, Naruto said. Don't make me beg, Itachi said in a low voice, making Naruto's eyes widen. He was willing to actually beg for Naruto to save her. Why would you lower yourself to that extent just to save her? Naruto asked, curious, but Itachi remained silent. You love her. After all this time? Naruto asked like it was the most obvious thing on the world, and Itachi just nodded. Always, Itachi answered. She was with me from the very beginning. We were born a single month apart. We were childhood friends and rivals at the same time. We graduated from the academy together, got into the same team, took the Chunin exams together. I fell for her because she treated me for the person I was. To her, I wasn't the son of the head of the Uchiha clan or the prodigy of the Uchiha clan. To her I was just Itachi, Itachi sadly said, and Naruto remained silent. I guess we are more alike than I thought, Naruto replied, chuckling and making Itachi look at him funny. I too fell for Hinata-chan because she was with me from the beginning, and because not matter what the village said, she never treated me as the demon or Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. To her I always was just Naruto. Besides, there was nothing I wouldn't do for her, Naruto explained and started walking forward until he was near Itachi, who held Nao's head on his lap. Naruto placed 2 fingers on Nao's forehead. Naruto took a deep breath and opened his eyes to display his silver eyes with concentric rings around the pupil. Naruto's fingers started glowing and Itachi watched as Nao's breathing became more stable. Her bones were reset to their proper locations and even the cuts on her skin just sizzled away. Naruto got up and stepped back as Nao started stirring. Itachi-kun, I'm feeling much better. Where are we? Nao asked as she slowly rose to a sitting position. Itachi-kun is it? Naruto thought to himself, chuckling. He knew deep down that he had made the right choice. He's almost ready to meet him, Kurama chuckled to himself before going back to sleep. We are in Konoha, more specifically in the Senju compound, Itachi replied and watched as Nao suddenly stiffened and jumped to her feet. She opened her eyes but only darkness greeted her. What happened to your eyes? Hinata asked, curious about the hollow white. I know that voice, Nao said, looking towards Hinata direction. You are that Hyuga I fought in Kiri, Nao said, getting into a defensive stance. She was in enemy territory. It's Senju now, Naruto-kun has asked me to marry him, Hinata said, but Nao didn't seem much concerned about that. Relax Nao-chan, Itachi said, placing a hand on her shoulder and making her instantly relax. You are among friends now, Itachi said, and Nao huffed. Hold still, Naruto said towards Nao as he approached her and put a finger in each eye, above her eyelid. Relax, Naruto said, but Nao remained stiff as a board. Is he going to take my eyes? Nao thought, fearful. She was in the wolf's den and blind to make it worse. Naraka path, Naruto said, and Nao was shocked when she heard Naruto say the exactly same words that Nagato had used to heal her eye when she fought Hinata back in Kiri. Open your eyes, Naruto said, and Nao slowly complied. Her eyes lids slowly rose and she was greeted with the face of Senju Naruto, but his eyes were not the Sharingan, they were the Rinnegan, glowing at full power. You have the Rinnegan, Nao muttered out loud. No thank you, no nothing, just you have the Rinnegan. I'm hurt, Naruto joked, making now smile slightly, easing the ambient. That's Naruto right there. All serious one second and joking around the next, Kushina thought, smiling. Of course, now said, slapping her forehead. You are both Uchiha and Senju. It's obvious that you would have the Rinnegan. I wonder how Fugaku still hasn't thought of that yet, now muttered out loud. So it's true, Itachi sadly replied and making now turn around. Everyone is still alive? Itachi asked and now nodded. Who is Tobi? Naruto asked, turning now around to look at him. Now gulped as she stared at Naruto's Sharingan and knew that lying probably would be a bad idea. Uchiha Fugaku, now replied, squirming under Naruto's gaze. Wasn't he the head of the Uchiha clan? Naruto asked and everyone nodded. Another simple Uchiha with delusions of grandeur, Tobirama grumbled. I knew I recognized his chakra from somewhere when he attacked with the Kyuubi 17 years ago, Minato replied, and for the first time now looked around to see just who exactly was with her. Why, Yondaime-sama, now said in shock and gulped when she saw who stood by his side. Senju Hashirama and his brother Senju Tobirama, Uzumaki Mito and Senju Kushina. How? Now asked towards Naruto, who smirked. You should know the power of the Rinnegan extends beyond life and death, Naruto simply replied. Of course, now said, smacking her head again. You are the perfect vessel for the Rinnegan. The Uchiha and Senju DNA in perfect balance. It figures that you could use it without any adversities, unlike Nagato, now said. Now, why don't you tell us everything you know about the Uchiha clan and the Akatsuki? Naruto asked and yet again now felt that it wasn't a question she could refuse. 1 hour later that's very useful information. Thank you now, Naruto replied and now nodded before turning towards Itachi. What now? Now asked and Itachi looked at Naruto. Now turned around to look towards Naruto as well. Smack, Itachi gave now a chop to the neck, making her fall forward. Itachi caught her before she fell and slowly lowered her to the ground. The hell, Itachi? Naruto asked as he watched him knock now unconscious. I'm going after my brother. Can you make me a promise? Itachi asked, looking at Naruto and making sure he understood the seriousness in his voice. If I don't make it back. Itachi trailed off as Naruto understood what he meant. We will take care of her like family. You have my word, Itachi, Naruto replied, and Itachi nodded before shunning away, heading towards the Uchiha hideout where he would meet with Sasuke and decided his fate. So he was Itachi, Tobirama said, scratching his chin. I guess he wasn't so bad for an Uchiha, Tobirama replied, making everyone sweat drop. Was Uchiha's all that he thought about? Ero Sennin, you know what to do? Naruto asked and Jiraiya nodded. I will contact my spies, Jiraiya replied, and everyone went back towards their dragons. Few days later, Uchiha hideout if you wish to kill me, resent me, hate me and survive in obscurity, Sasuke remembered as he approached the Uchiha hideout where Zetsu had told him Itachi was. Run, keep running and cling to life. Then one day, come before me with the same eyes I possess, Sasuke thought as his Mangekyo flared and he continued his path. So you have come, Itachi said with his eyes closed. Itachi was sitting in some kind of throne and was looking straight towards Sasuke, who stood in his front. Sasuke was wearing the traditional Uchiha clan outfit, dark blue vest with black pants. He had a blue belt in which he had a straight single-edged sword strapped into. On the back of his vest he bore the Uchiha fan. That Sharingan, Itachi said as he started to open his eyes. How much can you see? Itachi asked as his eyes fully opened to reveal blood-red eyes with 3 black tomos. How much I can see, you ask? Sasuke rhetorically asked as he stopped walking. Facing Itachi. With these eyes I see your death, Itachi, Sasuke replied, looking Itachi dead in the eyes. My death, huh? Itachi asked out loud. You are still arrogant, Sasuke. You shouldn't underestimate your opponent, Itachi advised as he leaned back, closing his eyes. Then make it happen, Itachi said as he disappeared and, in a blur, he was beside Sasuke with a kunai drawn. Sasuke followed his movement with his Sharingan and quickly turned. Sasuke placed a hand on his sword handle and brought his blade to parry Itachi's kunai. Both weapons clashed with a clang sound as both fighters struggled for victory. Sasuke broke the struggle and jumped back, going through hand seals. Kaiten. Gukakyu no Jutsu, great fireball technique. Sasuke said as he unleashed a massive fireball lighting up the room. Itachi bent slightly as he pulled several shuriken from his sleeves and hurled them towards Sasuke, through the fireball. Itachi jumped to the side to avoid it. Sasuke was forced to cancel his jutsu when several shuriken came towards him. The fireball had obscured the vision of them. Sasuke's Sharingan glowed as he tracked every single shuriken and started blocking them with his sword. Not a single movement was wasted, it was like he was dancing. When Sasuke had finished dodging every single shuriken, Itachi was suddenly upon his face and kicked him in the stomach, sending Sasuke flying into the wall. Sasuke crashed into the wall and stumbled to the ground as he began coughing. Sasuke rose his head to look for Itachi only for him be punched and pinned into the wall by the same person he was looking for. This is the end, Itachi said as he brought his fingers towards Sasuke's eyes. Your light is mine, Itachi said as ripped out one of Sasuke's eyes, making him yell in pain and clutch to his now empty eye socket. The curse seal on Sasuke's shoulder began activating, his body gained a brownish color and some kind of wings sprouted from his back. Suddenly the whole world started cracking, like some mirror that had just been broken. All the damage to the room simply disappeared as both Sasuke and Itachi were standing in the same position as before it all began. It useless Itachi, Sasuke said laughing. I am not a little kid anymore. My eyes can easily see through your genjutsu, Sasuke stated as his Sharingan glowed. You really are confident, Itachi said getting up from his throne. But for now, I will take your word for it, Itachi said until he looked towards Sasuke's Sharingan. Foolish little brother, I told to come to me only when you had gained eyes like mine, Itachi replied walking down the stairs until he stood but a few feet away from Sasuke. And I do, Sasuke said chuckling darkly as his Sharingan started spinning. I killed the only person I ever cared for just for these eyes Itachi and, with them, I will kill you for betraying our family, Sasuke said as his Sharingan turned into his Mangekyo, his eyes had three intersecting ellipses that resemble an atom model. Foolish little brother, Itachi said as his own Sharingan started spinning and becoming his Mangekyo Sharingan, a three-sided pinwheel. The problem was that Itachi's eyes didn't stop spinning, even after reaching the Mangekyo stage. Itachi's Mangekyo kept spinning and Sasuke watched in horror as his brother's eyes started changing into an unknown pattern. With one large chakra pulse, Itachi's eyes stopped spinning and Sasuke was gawking at the new pattern. Itachi's Sharingan had three intersecting ellipses and above that, a three-sided pinwheel. It was like a cross-match between Sasuke's and Itachi's own Mangekyo. Itachi's Eternal is Sasuke's from canon, how? Sasuke asked fearfully as he involuntarily took a step back, how can you have the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan? Sasuke asked shakily. How you ask? Itachi rhetorically asked sighing. It was a gift, from Naruto, Itachi simply replied making Sasuke's eyes widen in disbelief. You swapped eyes with him? Sasuke asked in shock. It doesn't matter what I did Sasuke. I'm righting my wrongs as of now, Itachi as his Eternal started glowing. Kuku, do you mind if I join the party? Both Sasuke and Itachi were surprised by this new voice as neither of them felt another chakra signature nearby. Both of them turned to the location of the new voice only to find Orochimaru of all people, leaning by the door frame and hungrily looking at both Uchihas. Sharingan, Sasuke said as he and Itachi took notice of Orochimaru's eyes. They were blood red with three black tomos spinning around the pupil. How do you have the Sharingan? Sasuke asked gritting his teeth but was met with mocking laughter. Answer me snake, Sasuke yelled but Orochimaru only chuckled. Amaterasu, Sasuke said as Orochimaru exploded in black flames. Still with the hot temper I see, Sasuke heard and turned around to see another Orochimaru sitting in the throne. Sasuke looked back to the black flames only to find nothing but mud on the ground. What is it you came for Orochimaru? Itachi stoically asked. He didn't care how Orochimaru got the Sharingan as long as he didn't interfere with his plans. Nothing much, Orochimaru said as he began walking towards both Uchihas, licking his lips in anticipation. I've come for my new light, Orochimaru chuckled until he took notice to Itachi's new eyes. Oh, you already have it, Orochimaru said surprised by Itachi bewielding the Eternal. Enough, Sasuke roared making Itachi and Orochimaru turn towards him. I will kill you both for disrespecting the Uchiha clan, Sasuke snarled as his began going through hand seals. Kaiten. Goryuka no Jutsu, Great Dragon Fire Technique. Sasuke said, and he unleashed several dragon-shaped fireballs towards their enemies. Orochimaru's eyes started spinning as he copied the jutsu and easily countered Sasuke with an equally powerful jutsu. So this is the Sharingan, amazing, Orochimaru chuckled to himself when he felt the Sharingan automatically copy the jutsu. Orochimaru made a single tiger seal and looked straight towards Sasuke. Juinjutsu Cursed Seal Techniques, activate, Orochimaru said, and Sasuke was immediately on the ground screaming in pain and clutching to his neck. Sasuke, Itachi said as he suddenly dashed towards Orochimaru, who smirked and waited for him. Orochimaru easily predicted Itachi's punch and tilted his head to the side, catching Itachi in an arm lock. A snake appeared behind Orochimaru and quickly bit on Itachi's neck. Itachi dispersed in a murder of crows. The crows started circling Orochimaru as they turned into shurikens, heading straight for Orochimaru from all directions. Orochimaru jumped high into the air, attaching himself to the ceiling. In a flash, Sasuke was upon Orochimaru with his hand sparkling. Chidori, Sasuke yelled as he thrust his hand forward. Sasuke's hand went right through Orochimaru's heart only for him to dispel into several snakes who fell to the ground. Disc, Sasuke scoffed as he looked down to find Orochimaru's and Itachi's location. Amaterasu, Orochimaru said as black flames appeared in the ground in front of him. Futen, Daitapa, great breakthrough. Orochimaru said, pumping his lungs with chakra and releasing a gust of wind that carried the black flames across the room. Orochimaru launched his jutsu and waited for the results. However, he didn't need to wait much as two colors rose in the background. Both Sasuke and Itachi were using their own Susanoo to block the black flames. Sasuke's Susanoo is deep purple and wielded a bow and arrow. Itachi's Susanoo was strong orange, wielding a shield and a saber. He has the Mangekyo as well, both Sasuke and Itachi thought. Yasaka no Magatama, Yasaka beads. Itachi said as another pair of arms sprouted from his Susanoo and began preparing ethereal orange beads to throw. Sasuke's Susanoo formed an arrow. Both attacks were launched at incredible speed towards Orochimaru, who jumped into the ceiling, breaking the stone and escaping the room. The room exploded as the attacks collided with the walls. Both Susanuos dropped as Itachi and Sasuke jumped outside of the room, following Orochimaru. As Itachi and Sasuke appeared on the roof, Orochimaru flexed his arms forwards as snakes came from his sleeves and easily entangled both brothers. Itachi dispelled into a murder of crows and Sasuke summoned his Susanoo to break free. You've grown strong, Sasuke, Itachi said, looking at his brother, who scoffed and simply jumped to the side as the tree warriors stood equal lengths from each other. Kaiten. Gukakyu no Jutsu, Great Fireball Technique, all three warriors said at the same time. Tree fireballs clashed in the middle as all three shinobi struggled for the upper hand. Sasuke closed his right in concentration before opening it and unleashing black flames to consume the existing fire. As the black flames disappeared, Sasuke's hand sparkled as he slammed it on the ground. Chidori Nagashi, Sasuke said as streak of lightning left in his hand heading towards Itachi and Orochimaru. Both warriors jumped back to gain some distance from Sasuke, who smirked. Sasuke looked up towards the sky and began laughing as thunders could be heard and heavy rain started falling. The heated air from all the fire jutsus and black flames had created a storm. The gathering of clouds had brought what Sasuke wanted, lightning. Sasuke's hand sparkled as he sent a lightning beam towards the sky, making light up the clearing. This is bad, Orochimaru said to himself as he knew very well what was coming. So he managed to recreate Naruto's Kirin Jutsu, Itachi thought to himself as his eyes started glowing and preparing for summoning his shield. Raiden, Kirin, Sasuke yelled as he brought his hand down and the skies roared. A blue dragon appeared in the sky. The dragon rocketed towards the ground, targeting either Itachi or Orochimaru or even both. Kuchios. Sanju Rashomon, Orochimaru said, slamming both hands on the ground as three massive defensive walls appeared in front of him to block Sasuke's jutsu. Susanoo, Itachi said as the dragon connected with the top of the building and, in a flash of blue, the building exploded, blasting chunks of rock everywhere and leveling the battlegrounds to nothing but rubble. As the smoke started clearing, Sasuke jumped down to ground level, taking deep breaths due to chakra usage. Sasuke scowled as he took notice that Itachi had summoned his Susanoo to defend himself, rendering his lightning jutsu useless. "You damn brat," Orochimaru snarled as he dug himself out of the rubble. The walls he had summoned were enough to protect him from the initial blast but not from the secondary explosion. Orochimaru's clothes were ripped apart and he was bleeding from several places. "I see you managed to copy my jutsu after all." All tree warriors standing on the clearing slowly turned their heads when they heard this new voice. The new person had long blonde, waist-length, spiky hair with fangs that framed his face and partially covered his right eye. He also had 3 distinctive whiskers marks on each cheek. His blonde hair swayed with the wind, giving him a more menacing look. "Just great, the Kyuubi is here," Orochimaru thought to himself, greeting his teeth. He had come for Sasuke's Itachi's eyes, but he had never expected for Sasuke to have grown this much, and now Naruto had joined the picture. "Long time no see, Naruto," Sasuke chuckled and Naruto took in the person who had addressed him. "Blood-red eyes, check. Arrogant and general aura of superiority, check. Duck butt-shaped hair, check. Emo and brooding, check. That's Sasuke alright," Naruto thought to himself, analyzing Sasuke. Naruto's Sharingan left nothing unchecked. Medium S rank, Naruto concluded from his observations. Sasuke had grown stronger than he had expected. "Care to explain to me why you knocked me out?" Now asked sweetly towards Itachi, who gulped as he dropped his Susanoo. "What the hell are you doing with the Senju, now?" Sasuke asked towards now. "Fugaku tried to kill me so I joined their side," now said, pointing towards Itachi and Naruto. "Zetsu," Naruto called out of nowhere and got confused faces from everyone, that is, until Zetsu showed up. "You called Naruto-sama?" the white Zetsu asked as he rose from the ground, besides Naruto. Everyone's jaw dropped when they heard the way Zetsu had addressed Naruto of all people. "You are to tell nothing to Fugaku of what occurred in here, are we understood?" Naruto asked and Zetsu nodded. "If you go then," Naruto said, and Zetsu sank back into the ground. "Naruto," Itachi called out, getting his attention. "What is she doing here?" "You gave me your word," Itachi said, narrowing his eyes. "I promised that I would take care of her, not that I would stop her from chasing you," Naruto said, shrugging his shoulders, making Itachi's eyes twitch. "Both of you leave. This is my problem to solve," Itachi replied as his Susanoo flared to life once again, making Sasuke and Orochimaru prepare themselves. "It's my problem too. I made the wrong choice back then and I intend to fix it right now alongside you." Now Huftas walked and stood side by side with Itachi. "Shall we do this like the old days?" Now asked, smirking and making Itachi chuckle. "Itachi is laughing," Sasuke thought in disbelief as he looked towards his older brother. Back in the day, a simple smile was the best he could get from him. Itachi dropped his Susanoo as his eyes reverted back to the standard Sharingan. Now grinned as she stood side by side with Itachi, just like the old days. Both Uchihas had their normal Sharingan blazing at full power and looking towards Sasuke and Orochimaru. "Like the old days?" Itachi asked, turning to Now, who grinned. "Like the old days," Now replied, nodding her head as both Uchihas disappeared from view. "I guess I'll stick around and watch," Naruto muttered to himself as he jumped to safety and simply observed the battle from afar. Orochimaru shed his skin to heal any damage he had suffered from Sasuke's Raiden Jutsu. He looked around as his Sharingan tracked both Itachi and Now, but, even then, they were nothing but blurs. He had yet to grow accustomed to his eyes. That was the reason as to why he could only use the Amaterasu flames as of now. Orochimaru's eyes shifted to his left as he looked towards Naruto, who was calmly sighting on the nearby walls, observing with battle with calculating eyes. Orochimaru heard Naruto say he would only watch, but shinobi aren't known for their honor. Orochimaru blinked as Now appeared right next him. Masai no Ken, fire punch. Now cocked her fist back and slammed it into Orochimaru's stomach. He buckled in pain just as Now kicked him away, sending him sailing through the air. "Kaiten. Ruka no Jutsu, fire dragon technique," Itachi said, unleashing a torrent of fire towards the flying Orochimaru, engulfing him in flames. Orochimaru tumbled into the ground, consumed by flames. "I got you," Sasuke yelled as he took opportunity of Itachi's jutsu. Sasuke appeared behind Itachi, with his sword drawn, ready to impale his older brother. Clang! Sasuke's eyes widened when his sword was blocked by Nao's. She smirked and held her grip as Sasuke pushed forward, in a battle of strength. Itachi burst into crows as both Now and Sasuke disengaged and jumped apart. Enough, Orochimaru yelled as he dropped to the ground and opened his mouth. Madara no Jin, formation of 10,000 snakes. Orochimaru said as countless snakes started emerging from his mouth. Thousands upon thousands of snakes that rose high into the sky. All of them opened their mouths to reveal a sword at the tip. Susanoo, Itachi and Now both said as two towering ethereal samurais appeared. Their chakras spiked as sabers appeared in their arms and they began slicing the snakes into nothing. Amaterasu, both Uchihas said as a gigantic wave of black flames rained down on Orochimaru's attack. The Susanoos disappeared as everyone looked for Orochimaru. The snakes had all been disintegrated. Chidori Isoke Chidori laser spear, out of nowhere a lighting blade was shot from Sasuke's wrist, heading straight towards Now. Itachi bumped Now out of the way and got pierced right through his shoulder. Bastard, Now snarled as she ran towards Sasuke. Itachi stumbled to the ground as he clutched to his bleeding shoulder. I've been waiting for this opportunity, Orochimaru chuckled darkly as he rose from the ground in front of Itachi. Tsukuyomi, Orochimaru gasped as Itachi locked eyes with him, placing Orochimaru in his strongest genjutsu. Tsukuyomi world the world around Orochimaru shimmered out of existence and was replaced by a sea of red and a black sun. Orochimaru found himself in a new world, with Itachi standing right in front of him. This again, Orochimaru chuckled at Itachi's pathetic attempt of stopping him. This genjutsu no longer works against me, Orochimaru said. Then break it, Itachi simply replied. Kai, Orochimaru said as he flared his chakra but nothing happened. He flared his chakra once again but the illusion didn't even waver. He took a step back when he noticed Itachi calmly walking towards him with his eternal spinning. Even if you now possess the Mangekyo Sharingan, you shouldn't underestimate the power of an eternal. If you think that all it does is preventing blindness then you are mistaken, Itachi explained still walking towards Orochimaru who was suddenly strapped into a cross. The eternal Mangekyo has granted me one final power, Itachi said smiling while Orochimaru just stared in horror as several blades rose from the ground, created from nothingness. With the eternal, my illusions can achieve their final level. With my new eyes, I can turn any injury I do to you, into a very painful reality, Itachi said smiling and Orochimaru's eyes widened. My strongest illusion, one that can trick the brain itself into thinking that the injuries are real and have them inflicted in the physical body, the highest level of illusion one can achieve, this Orochimaru, is my Shinko Tsukuyomi, true Tsukuyomi. Itachi said as he picked up a blade. There is a downside unfortunately, Itachi said sighing and Orochimaru seemed somewhat relived. I can't hold the illusion for long like I could with my original Tsukuyomi, so let's not wait any longer, Itachi said as he swung his blade. Back in the real world both Orochimaru and Itachi were frozen, looking into each other's eyes without even blinking. Suddenly, a deep gash appeared in Orochimaru's cheek, letting blood leak out freely. Just as things couldn't get any weirder, Orochimaru's right eye exploded in a cloud of blood and flesh. Interesting, Naruto thought as he watched several cuts and gashes appear on Orochimaru's body out of nowhere. Now and Sasuke were engaged in a heated taijutsu brawl. Sasuke's Susanoo could only brace himself against the onslaught of Nao's fire taijutsu who apparently could melt almost anything. Might dance. Nao yelled as her arms burst in black flames. Kuroi Hano no might dance of the black flame. Nao said as her Sharingan started glowing and she dashed forward, jumping to the side as a purple arrow flew by and crashed into the ground. Sasuke coughed as his chakra levels dropped and he was forced into a single ribcaged Susanoo. He had been fighting for hours and his chakra levels were running low, while Nao had arrived just moments ago and had plenty of chakra to go around. Sasuke was forced to kneel as Nao punched the Susanoo, leaving behind her black flames as they began to eat away his shield. Sasuke's Sharingan was glowing as he frantically searched for his opponent. Sasuke caught a blur and braced himself as Nao materialized herself in front of him and kicked him. Sasuke's Susanoo cracked as he sent flying and crashing into the ground, making a crater. Nao watched as Sasuke stumbled to get up, his Susanoo dropping and blood leaking from his mouth and other wounds on his body. Nao shifted her attention away from Sasuke and towards the origin of the scream. She looked towards Itachi as he took deep breaths to regain his breathing. Standing in front of Itachi was Orochimaru with one eye destroyed and several deep gashes all over his body. Orochimaru's right arm laid unmoving on the ground as he clutched to stop the bleeding. Now smiled at Orochimaru's state as she approached Itachi and holstered him up by the arm. If you think this is the end of me, you are wrong, Orochimaru snarled as he vanished in the wind. Now and Itachi turned towards Sasuke who still remained on the ground. What now, Sasuke? Itachi asked as Sasuke lifted his head towards his adversaries to display black eyes. The Sharingan had been disabled due to lack of chakra. Arghhhhhhh. Sasuke screamed in pain as Orochimaru appeared behind his back with a sword on his mouth. Orochimaru pierced through Sasuke's chest, right through his heart. I'm not leaving here empty-handed, Orochimaru screamed as he slithered around Sasuke and brought his hand to his eyes. Rasengan. In a flash, Naruto was beside Orochimaru, slamming his orb of silver chakra into his chest. Orochimaru was blasted away from Sasuke before he could steal his eyes. He crashed into the walls and simply slid to the ground, unmoving. Sasuke, Itachi said as he hurriedly approached his younger brother who now laid on the ground, bleeding from his wound. Itachi kneeled beside his brother, placing his hand on top of Sasuke's chest to stem the blood flow. Itachi looked at Sasuke who was coughing and taking quick and deep breaths. Why? Why did it have to end like this? Itachi sadly asked. I don't know, Sasuke coughed a mouthful of blood before continuing. I just wanted my family back. Cough, I hated you most of my life for killing our family. Then I learned that they were alive, you betrayed them and I vowed to kill you, Sasuke said looking away. I just wanted my family back. I wanted it to be like it was before the whole thing happened. Cough, with the fangirls yelling at how awesome I was, with Sakura punching the blonde idiot, Sasuke said smiling and making Naruto chuckle. And with you as my big brother, Sasuke said with a lone tear streaming down his face. Foolish little brother, Itachi said bringing his forehead to Sasuke's. I will always be your big brother as you will always be my little one, Itachi said and Sasuke smiled. I'll see you around, San, Sasuke said as he let out his last breath and closed his eyes forever. In the end, he was just a lost kid, Kurama said as Naruto watched the end of one Uchiha Sasuke, a friend and an enemy. What now? Now asked as she turned away from Sasuke and towards Itachi who seemed to be looking towards the horizon. You know you can't return to the Akatsuki with Tobi being Fugaku, now said. Let's go home Itachi, Naruto said approaching the man and placing his hand on his shoulder, healing his wound. Your real home, Naruto said and watched as Itachi sighed but nodded. Kaden, fire style. Naruto said as he kneeled down beside Sasuke and placed a hand on his chest. Sasuke's body started glowing orange until he burst into flames and in just a few seconds, he was nothing more than dust. He's gone, now yelled as she ran back to Naruto and Itachi. She was after Orochimaru but there was nothing left of where he crashed. Orochimaru is meaningless as of now. He will just crawl back to his lab and try to repair his body, Naruto said explained and motioned now to come towards him. Let's go home, Naruto said as he touched both Uchihas. May you find happiness in the afterlife, knowing you didn't find it here, Itachi thought, looking at the sky, as Naruto and both Uchihas disappeared in a flash of yellow, leaving behind the battlefield.